Hello, friends. I'm Andrea Morris, and welcome to another edition of Spill the Wine, our podcast, which is about wine, and kind of my love letter at the moment to the Niagara wine region because I think it's underlooked and it's one of the most fantastic areas that we have for wine in the country of Canada. So we are here to discover more new wineries and more fabulous wine. And today I am so excited to be at a winery that I think is spectacular, which is Cloudsley Cellars, and I am joined by Adam Lowy.
Hello.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
Yay. And also, they're not normally open, so we're having a really special time with just us. We don't have to worry about tons of crowds of people around making noise, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's our quiet time of year in the winter where we closed up for winemaking, and we have yet to open up for our private tastings, which will run until spring when we open up entirely.
And this podcast will air in the spring, so it's perfect.
Wonderful.
Absolutely great timing. So, Adam, tell me a little bit about Cloudsley Cellars. How long have you guys been around?
Well, I started the project in 2015. I'd been in the wine business my whole career, but on the other side, on the import side, and I've had a real love for Niagara and started it sort of as a little bit of a hobby on the side, and quickly realized that I wanted to jump in with both feet. So by the first couple vintages in 2015 and 16, we made virtually at another winery, and then in 2017 we put this building together and introduced Chardonnay. Initially, it was just Pinot, and we've been solely focused on Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in the 20-mile bench ever since.
Where'd the name Cloudsley come from?
Cloudsley is my mother's maiden name.
Oh.
And it was a name that has come to an end in my family. There are no more Cloudsleys around, so it was a way of honoring her side of the family. And truth is, I wanted a name that was meaningful to me, but I didn't want my own name on the label. So this served a lot of purposes.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's an old name, but there aren't many Cloudsleys around. So I didn't have to fight a lot of people for the name, so it was wonderful.
And your location, kind of going up the hill on Victoria, is great because you look down and it's kind of like you see the lake and you've got the clouds, and so it's absolutely perfect.
We are certainly in a perfect location here.
Now, how did you come about this property?
I knew when I started, having been in the fine wine business for a long time, I knew that, great wine's only made with great vineyards. And so I looked at the area of Niagara that I thought had the best potential and was indeed already producing the best grapes. And so I really wanted to be on the bench, and particularly in 20-mile bench. And I had a relationship with some growers in the area, and I was able to secure this spot to make Cloudsley. So it's been great.
Now, do you grow your own grapes on the property?
There are some grapes. There's certainly grapes on the property. It's kind of an interesting thing. We've got some Pinot Noir planted here, but most of the grapes that we get are from surrounding vineyards that are owned by other growers. Predominantly the Wismer family that owns Foxcroft and Wingfield Vineyard, which are two Chardonnay vineyards, in addition to Glen Elgin Vineyard and Cuesta Vineyard. We also, and Parke Vineyard, which we get Pinot Noir from. And then we also work with our friends at Hanck Vineyard, just beside Parke, and End of the Road Vineyard, which is the furthest one away at about 3 miles.
Now, do you use the same vineyards every year, or do you switch it around and go?
No, absolutely. We're not buying grapes on the open market. What we do is we have long-term relationships with the growers where the vineyards are farmed to our specifications, and we get the exact same rows every year. So it's in essence as if we owned it, in the sense that we are. We're the viticulture is done at a very high level, but it allows us to access interesting different sites and importantly, sites that have some decent vine age on them. When I came into when I started the project, I didn't want to plant a vineyard and wait forever for the vines to be mature. And I also didn't want to commit to just one site. I wanted to see, the whole variance in terroir, particularly on the bench here in 20 Mile, is spectacular, and I wanted to explore that. So we have multiple cases where we'll have vineyards that are either adjacent to each other or very close to each other that taste very, very different, even though they're farmed in the same way and produced the same way. Well, that's what terroir is. That's an individual site telling its story. So, for example, in 2020, we made 6 Pinot Noirs, all from 20 Mile Bench. 5 of the 6 are within a kilometer of each other. Well, and they all taste different. And that, to me, as a wine geek, is really interesting. So,
I've noticed that when I've done tastings with, I did one at Casaba with 3 different kinds of Syrah, same year, 3 different vineyards on the property, completely different taste to each one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really, really interesting.
It is, absolutely. And wine with larger regional designations can be very interesting. But as you drill down, it becomes more interesting, because you're not only seeing what the individuality of one particular vintage, but you're looking at a really specific place. And when you're drinking that wine made with that kind of intention, you're tasting a wine that couldn't have come from any other time or any other place. And it's a snapshot, if you will. And that's really interesting. And I think in a world where we have so many homogenized and almost commodity-like wines, I think it's really interesting to still delve into what I think the kind of wine that has made people passionate about and excited about wine for hundreds of years. The
kind of wine you take a sip and you're like, it's like you can almost hear a chorus of angels singing.
That's what we aim for, certainly. Yeah.
I've had that experience here with your Pinot, so I know. Yeah, I'm very excited about that.
Wonderful.
And now the nice thing I think too, that you said too, is like, because you use the same vineyards, you know that they will have grapes for you every year. It's not like you're in a bidding war.
Oh no, absolutely. We have very close relationships with them, and as I said, we're getting the same rows every year, and we're constantly talking with them throughout the growing season about how things are going, and discussions about whether or not to pull more leaves or to reduce the crop or whatever the case may be.
So you're pretty hands-on with the whole thing as well.
We certainly are. Yeah, a lot of it's communicated between Matt Smith, our great winemaker, and the vineyard managers. Now,
is there a reason for only doing Chardonnay and Pinot?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a few reasons, really. One, first and foremost, they're what I love, and it's where my passion was. And it's also, they also naturally go hand in hand. I mean, these are the 2 noble wines from Burgundy. And you'll see this in other places where people have been inspired by Burgundy. They've paired the 2 because obviously they grow well together. They grew up together in Burgundy, these 2 varietals, and they tend to thrive in the same kinds of places. And of course, I love these 2 varietals when they're made from great vineyards in cool climate regions. So that inspired me, and that's the kind of area we're in here. That's what this area does best, and that's the most important thing. That's it's maybe you could look at it a chicken and egg. Why am I here? Well, because that's where Pinot and Chard, but also why Pinot and Chard? Because if I'm here, this is what that's what works best, in my opinion, here. And I think it's I think too many people around the world have tried to make wine, tried to fit that square peg into a round hole by saying, "Oh, I love this style, and so I want to make it here." Well, you got to listen to what the vineyard and what the area tells you, and clearly, and many people who came before me have demonstrated that these are 2 varietals that work really, really well on the bench in Niagara.
So if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Well, absolutely. And I think we can, and the recognition that we've, as an industry, have got for Chardonnay and Pinot in this area is clearly an indication that we're on the right track.
Now, do you enter your wines into contests for awards and things?
Some, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not something that we do, that we put too much stock into, because obviously the most important thing is pouring a wine for someone and having them taste it and experience it for themselves. But yeah, it never hurts to have your wine put out there, and we've been fortunate to have some good results in tastings and had very good scores by press here in Canada and internationally. So we're excited about that. But really, it's about the individual tasting it and getting turned on to this style of wine and to this really cool area.
I think this is a great area, and I think it's time to maybe start tasting some of this wine.
Wonderful. So we're going to start off with some Chardonnay, and the first wine is our 2022 20 Mile Bench Chardonnay. Now, this is a blend of two vineyards, Foxcroft, which is directly across the street, and Wingfield, which is about 800 yards up the road. We make this wine, like all of our Chardonnay, with hand-picked grapes. They come to the winery in small baskets, and we then pass the grapes along a 4-meter-long stainless steel sorting table that vibrates and moves the grapes along very slowly. We have a number of people around picking out any grapes that aren't perfect. And then the wine is pressed and put into a tank where it settles for a day or two. We don't settle it super clean, but we don't want to get everything out, but we want the heaviest solids to fall out. And then we put the wine in French oak barrels where we allow it to ferment naturally, so without the addition of any commercial yeast, so what many people call a wild yeast fermentation. And we'll leave it in those barrels for 18 months. So it's in essence, it's pretty hands-off winemaking. We don't do a lot of manipulation. We find that the wines we like the most are the wines where we've done the least. Now, of course, throughout that whole process, you're worrying and monitoring and doing all those things, and intervening when you need to. Say if there's a barrel that's not working out, you might transfer it to another vessel, or if you feel that it needs some oxygenation or some stirring or something, we may do that. But for the most part, we try and really leave things alone, because we find that the wine that makes itself is often the wine we like. I don't want to take anything away from our winemaker. Yeah. He certainly does a lot, and it's his judgment with all of these things that allows the wines to really reach their peak. So
it's a lovely, very light color.
Yeah, it's this is sort of classic cool climate Chardonnay, where we pick relatively early. We're usually the first to pick in Chardonnay in this particular spot, because we want to retain those cooler flavors. We don't want to allow the grapes to get into that sort of more tropical kind of fruit zone, which actually can happen quite a bit, particularly in Foxcroft. The grapes will ripen and get sort of what I consider overripe flavors, which appeal to some, but it's not really what we're after. Mm. I love those cooler flavors that tend to work really well with that sense of minerality we get from these limestone soils here, and that bright acidity that we're able to retain.
Kind of like that crisp apple.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's a little bit of that on the nose.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, this wine has been in French oak barrels was in French oak barrels for 18 months. 20% of those barrels were new, and the rest had been used previously. And it's that new oak that tends to impart flavor. But I wouldn't describe this as an overly oaky wine.
No, not at all.
Because we're very, very careful about the barrels we choose. We spend a tremendous amount of money on getting barrels that are just perfect, going down to not only picking how long that the wines have been, or the wood has been aged, how tight the grain is, certainly the toast in the barrel, but even the particular forest that the wood comes from. So all of these decisions help us dial in a barrel that's most appropriate for the particular style that we're going for here. And interestingly, by having the wine in barrel for 18 months as opposed to, say, 10 months that is common in practice, it allows the fruit and the fruit and the oak to integrate well, so you get a sort of more elegant presentation.
Yes, it's not like some of the wines that are in oak tend to have that real caramel sort of flavor to them, but this is still very true to like a crisp. It's very succinct, a little citrusy, but a little apple. And
I appreciate that, and I think what you're also getting is not only the flavors, but the way they're presented, and that underlying tension that you get there from the acid, and also that sense of minerality that we get on the mid palate and on the finish from these limestone soils here, allow the fruit to be a little bit more delicately presented. And so there's and the end result is a wine that's mouth-watering and refreshing, that doesn't leave, there's no cloying element, it doesn't leave your mouth tired after. And that's really what we're going for in all our wines, Chardonnay and Pinot. We want wines that have some vibrancy to them, that have lift, and that are have a really nice energy to them.
Yeah, I would say that you've hit the nail on the head with this one. It's
Wonderful.
I could picture it and like a nice like fish with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something just light.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, having you can imagine that I've had these wines several times with many different dishes, and so
what's your favorite?
Well, I love this obviously with fish. I mean, I love eating fish, so this works really well with this. With anything from a light white fish to a smoked to a grilled salmon, this can handle that. But it also works really, really well with roast chicken.
Oh, interesting.
So I think a wine like this is actually quite versatile, and so people have been known to drink it without food as well.
I was just going to say that because it's very light. It was like I was just thinking summertime when it's nice and hot, chill this slightly, and just sit outside on the deck and watch the world go by.
The only danger is it tends to evaporate really quickly.
Yeah.
It goes down rather rather smoothly.
2 or 3 bottles in.
That's right. So that's great. And this wine is sort of as I mentioned, it's our 20-mile bench blend. It's a blend of 2 vineyards. It's kind of the core of what we do here. And this sells at the winery for $32.50.
That's great.
Yeah. And so before making this wine, we look at all the barrels, and if in years where we think the quality warrants it, we'll isolate small parcels of each vineyard and make a single vineyard bottling. So next, we're going to actually look at the 2022 Wingfield Vineyard Chardonnay, followed by the Foxcroft Vineyard Chardonnay. So essentially, what we'll be seeing are individual single vineyard examples of the 2 sources for the wine that we're tasting right now.
So this is like the marriage, and then this
absolutely,
is
yeah. And so that's generally what it is. These 20-mile bench wines are a blend of more than one vineyard site, and we also make single vineyard wines.
And on the first sip, like I said, the first sip to me was very, very crisp. But the more it settles on the glass and the more I'm getting used to it, I'm seeing it warm up a little bit to me, and
absolutely,
and just becoming a little bit more complex than it was on the initial sip, which is why it's always important to never gulp down your first sip in a wine tasting.
Sure.
Always take 1 sip, then a second, because the wine kind of like really on the 3rd sip, I think, is when you really know what the wine's all about.
Well, absolutely. And also, this wine's right out of a refrigerator, not right out, but it's come down a little bit in temperature, but or come up a little bit in temperature, but it's still quite cold. So you're seeing that. It's also been in bottle, right? So we've just popped the cork on this. So one thing that, many people associate decanting wines with older red wines to remove sediment, or with young wines to introduce oxygen. But often quality white wines, particularly Chardonnay that's classically made like this, can really benefit from some air. So decanting a wine like this, or at least giving it some time in the glass to open up, will really show you more dimension to the wine. So we can go from here to Wingfield Vineyard Chardonnay. And this is the wine that I mentioned, the vineyard site that I mentioned, that is about 800 yards up the road. It's, as with Foxcroft, owned by the Wismer family. And this is a really interesting site. It's quite a bit cooler than Foxcroft. In fact, so much so that we tend to pick it 2 to 4 weeks after Foxcroft, even though it's only 800 yards away.
Wow.
So a really different site. The vines were planted in the 1990s, and so they're older vines by Niagara standards, and really beautiful site, pure expression of bench Chardonnay.
Very nice nose to it. It's not as crisp.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I don't get that apple
Mm-hmm.
smell coming. That scent rather. It's really settling in there.
Mm-hmm. And you still get that freshness.
Yes.
And but it's a little denser, a little more complex.
It's like you put a sweater on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about these, I mean, to be honest, look, our single vineyard Chardonnays, rather than being $32.50, are $53. So they're more expensive. But it's not to say that they're necessarily. We're not trying to. I mean, of course, we're choosing the best barrels for these wines, and it's a micro selection, and that's and when I say the best barrels, not the best barrels that we've purchased, the best not the best wood. It's the barrels that after 18 months or after their period of what we refer to as the élevage, the raising of the wine in barrel, the barrels that speak to us and that show the best, and so we're it is the cream of the crop in essence, but it's not unusual for some people to prefer the blend of the two vineyards because they're just different expressions of Chardonnay. But for us, it's extremely important to highlight these particular vineyards and to show that this is what Wingfield was all about in 2022. And it's fun at the winery when we're able to pour the blend and then pour some of the components of that blend, and people can see sort of understand where that blended wine came from.
Yeah. And then importantly too, like we all have different palates. So
absolutely.
What I like and what I'm tasting, you might not taste at home.
No.
If you come here, you might have a completely different experience.
No, we've often had couples in dispute as to what to take home with them, because one vineyard might appeal more to one person and another to their spouse. So
this becomes I can taste a little bit of caramel on it on this one, not a ton, but just a tiny little bit. I feel like I'm tasting what the oak is bringing to me.
Mm. Well, the next wine we're going to try is the sister, if you will, the Foxcroft vineyard from the vineyard directly across the street. So it is a really spectacular site that I think demonstrates more than maybe any other place what is so interesting about 20 Mile Bench for Chardonnay, because you're able to get powerful Chardonnay flavor with that wonderful sense of minerality that I was speaking of before, and that's beautiful, like the wines hung on a taut clothesline.
And this one it's funny because the Wismere is deeper in color.
The Wingfield,
yeah. Than this one. But
in essence, this made up more of the first wine.
I was going to say,
yeah. So, and this is a wine that has not yet been released to the public. It's our wine club members have had access to it, but it will soon be released to the public. We don't have a lot of either of these wines. These are an embarrassingly small production this year, but in 2022 we only made about 35 cases each of these single vineyard wines.
Wow.
Normally it's more than that, but it was a small vintage, and we were tempted to keep it all for our 20 Mile Bench because we needed that volume there. But the wines were too good. We wanted to make at least some of our single vineyard wines, and these particular lots were or these particular barrels showed the best. So that
it's really lovely.
Yeah, no, it's great.
It almost feels like that little. It's like sparkling to me. Like if I was drinking a sparkling Chardonnay, it almost has that kind of flavor to it to me.
Yeah, it's like
without the bubbles.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful,
absolutely stunning.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and it's been a wine that was slow to evolve, which is why actually we released the Wingfield first. And which indicates to me that it's probably going to be quite long-lived.
Yes, I can see that because, like, again, third sip, it's just there's a little bit of sweetness that's coming a little bit, and it's just like it's really presenting itself to be so complex.
Yeah. Well, I'm tasting this for the first time in a little while, and I'm happy to see that it's starting to open up a little bit because I've always known the quality was there, but it hasn't. This was bottled in May of last year, and so we have the luxury of being small and not having sort of supermarket orders to fill and all that sort of thing. So with this kind of thing, we tend to want to release it when it's ready. And so now I'm comfortable with where this is sitting.
It's
beautiful. Although I have to say that I will be putting some of this away for years to come because I can see that this is going to improve a lot over the next few years.
How many years do you think it would be where it's evolved to the point that you think that this is it?
Well, I kind of think these top Chardonnays, I mean, I love them at about 5 years old. So, but they can certainly last much longer than that. But I think they certainly continue to improve over the first few years after release. But again, like anything with wine, it depends on how you like it. I mean, some people really like the more overt fruit that comes in a younger wine, and other people prefer the sort of more the tertiary notes and the more delicate presentation of fruit that comes as a wine matures. So
the minerality definitely is that you can taste that.
Yeah,
it's that you can taste that it does have that to it, but it's so complementary to the rest of the flavors. This is a completely wonderful wine that I can see. If you don't come here, listener, and get this, you're going to be sorry.
And if you're from elsewhere, we'll send it to you.
Do you ship outside of the province, or
to some places where we're permitted to? Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also sell. We have an agent in Quebec that we work with, and in addition, we have an importer in the United Kingdom. So we're selling in London and working on a few other export markets. So
is it frustrating to not be able to sell to more places?
It is. I find it. I've always found it frustrating that in Canada that each province treats wine from another province as an imported product, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And at the time of recording this, there are some external trade threats that we're facing in Canada, and it seems to me that now is a perfect time to revisit some of these archaic institutions that we've got that keep us from sharing what's best here.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be. We should find a way to be able to buy food and wine province to province in an easier way, and not rely so much on imports from other countries.
Agree wholeheartedly. Although, if as we're speaking, if the tariffs from the United States do take effect and they pull all the California wines off the shelves, then hey, it's an opportunity for people to explore more Ontario wine.
Yeah, well, they should do that anyways.
I am always saying that. Yeah,
they certainly should, and which is why I really appreciate the focus of your podcast because, it's interesting. I was speaking just yesterday with a restaurateur who had been around for quite some time, and we were reflecting on the change. I started selling wine to restaurants in the mid-1990s, and getting people to list on Ontario wine at the time was quite difficult. I mean, you could maybe convince them to put one on the list in case they had some tourist who wanted to try it. Well, now, I mean, there are entire restaurants that have nothing but VQA wine, and customers are demanding it because, and it's not only out of some sense of loyalty to shop locally or some environmental reason or whatnot. It's because we make some of the best wine in the world.
Exactly.
And the beauty is that we're turning people on. The only frustrating thing is it takes one person at a time, and there are still lots of people out there that don't realize that right on their doorstep are some of the most fantastic Pinots and Chards and other varietals.
I think that, what would be really great if there was someone, if there was someone that would go to like other places, like say go into New York, go into like I'm originally from Ohio, and when I was in Ohio in November, I was at a wine bar, and I said to the woman, I looked at her wine list, and I'm like, why don't you have any Ontario wines? And she was like, I didn't realize. I said, no, you need to make a trip. I'm like, here's my card. You can stay at my house. I will take you to wineries. I'm like, because you're missing out.
Yeah.
And I gave her a really hard time about the fact that she didn't have any Ontario wines on her list. I'm like, you're telling me that you're one of the top sommeliers in the area, but you have never explored a region that's literally 3 hours away from you.
Yeah, well, it's tough because they've got us, an interesting system there where it's complicated to get wine into the United States too. You need an importer, and that importer needs to deal with distributors, and it's a state by state thing there as well. So and of course you can imagine that in the U.S. they bring in wine from all over the place, but they have such a massive domestic industry as well that they're not screaming for our wine in many places, but I think
but they should be,
and they will be.
Yeah,
and certainly, you can go to some top restaurants in New York City and in some other key markets and find excellent Niagara wine. But we have yet to. Funny enough, we've had more of an impact in London and some other European cities than we have in the United States.
That's weird.
Yeah, well, it's a part of it's the valiant effort of my colleagues in the business of year after year going and doing these trade tastings and exposing the wine. And I think part of it is also the style we make here is I think more easily understood by someone who drinks European wine, because it's a cool climate region that has a wonderful, vibrant acidity like French and Italian wines often do. So I think the UK market, which is, historically the most, the broadest minded market in the world, they had wines from everywhere, and they've really been tastemakers in a lot of ways throughout the centuries with regards to shaping the wine trade. And I think that they're used to drinking these wines from Burgundy, so they understand what we're doing here. And I think so that might be part of it, but maybe they also have a soft spot for their Commonwealth cousins. Who knows?
Could be. Yeah, I think that we need to get more people to listen to this podcast and come out here to Ontario and see what they're missing.
I agree.
Because that is an absolutely spectacular Chardonnay.
Thank you. So can I interest you in tasting some Pinot now?
Oh, yes. Pinot Noir is one of my favorite wines. And I know for a fact that yours are spectacular. So
Great.
I'm very excited about this.
Wonderful. So what we'll do now is we'll taste our, with Chardonnay, we're going to start off with our 20 Mile Bench Pinot Noir, which is a blend of vineyards. And then we'll try a couple single vineyard bottlings. Before
we do that, can we just address, listener, you can't see this, but I'm going to actually take photos of the two different glasses, because the white wine glass as opposed to the Pinot glass is completely different. And is there a reason for the difference in drinking glasses in those?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly, I don't think, I'm not too dogmatic about it, but certainly some glasses I think are more suited to some wines. And Pinot, many people believe, and I also, that having a little bit more volume in the bowl, so a little bit wider glass that also tapers, gets smaller at the top, has enough room in it by the size to gather all that beautiful aroma, but then it narrows at the top to focus it on your nose. So classic Pinot Noir glass like we have here, I think is really perfect for these wines. And with Chardonnay, I mean, the glass we're using here, it's not quite as big, and maybe tapers a little bit. We have another glass that we sometimes use for Chardonnay as well, but there's no real wrong answer with it. I think I have a few things. I don't personally like a glass that has a cheaper glass with a rolled rim. I like a nice fine glass. I think it delivers the wine to your lips more more comfortably. And I think it's when you're drinking a nice wine, it's nice to have a good glass. But there's no one answer to that question. But I certainly, here we certainly like these Pinot glasses for our Pinots.
I just wondered because, well, I know the answer, but I wanted to share it with people because it's really interesting to see the difference in the glasses.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to sort of have a look at what we mean, go to the Riedel website, and they have different wine glasses for different varietals, and they were sort of maybe the first to popularize that idea.
You could go broke on glasses alone.
You absolutely can, and that's quite a rabbit hole to jump.
So this is our blend.
Yeah, this is the 2021 Pinot Noir. So the 2022 vintage that we had before in Chardonnay was a vintage where it was a smaller production of a lot of intensity. 2021 was a little different. It was quite a nice year, but we experienced a lot of rain as we moved into harvest. So there was a little bit of a battle to get the grapes off before too much rain fell. But what we found was that particularly after the wine had been in barrel for a while, that they came together beautifully. And what we have is a really bright, elegant expression of Pinot Noir that is I think quite a classic vintage coming off of 2020. We're actually going to taste it 2020 a little later, and 20 was a really bigger, riper year. And many people said, "Oh, it's the greatest vintage we've ever had here." And I think for some people that may be true, but for me, I'll see the value in the warmer vintages and the cooler vintages because I like that sort of medium-bodied, slightly lighter expression of Pinot Noir, where you've got tons of flavor, but maybe it's not quite as maybe less alcohol and a little less immediate power, but tons of flavor still. And I think this 21 Pinots certainly provide that.
It's a very pretty color. It's like a light plum almost, not too light.
And you see, it's not. It's by no means a big wine, but it's not missing any flavor, and it's a really nice wine to drink on its own. But as I said, these wines work really well with food.
Yeah, what's nice about Pinot, it's like a thinner wine, but it does have such a beautiful flavor.
Yeah, and the nose is I mean, I always find that almost more than any other red wines that so much of the enjoyment of Pinot comes from the nose. I just find myself going back to it constantly. I can't put my glass down usually. So it's and it changes throughout as you sit with it. So you're always looking at it and finding some other different little nuance. So it's
what would you pair this with?
It's interesting. We were talking about fish before because this works really well with salmon as well if you want to go on that side, but could work really well with poultry. But I like this kind of wine with duck or other
turkey.
Sort of turkey certainly. Classic sort of Thanksgiving wines. These things, but again. I've been known to drink them on their own. And part of the reason why this style of wine works so well is that it is refreshing and it is a wine that's not overpowering. It doesn't neither wears you out in the head or in the because it's not very high alcohol. It's only about 12.5%.
So you could easily open a couple of bottles of that and have a great night.
No,
this is it gets softer. Again, like it's just like it keeps opening up more and more, and it's just becomes much more inviting on every taste. So it's really, really lovely.
Yeah, and so this is, I mentioned, in the case of the 20 Mile Bend Chardonnay, it was a blend of 2 vineyards. Well, in this case, this is a blend of 4 vineyards. Oh. So we've got the Parke and Hanck vineyards, which are immediately to the north of the winery. And then we've got Glen Elgin, which is up on the next level above us on the escarpment. So all of these are within a kilometer of the winery. And then we've got a little bit of end of the road vineyard, which is the vineyard that's furthest east that we deal with, which is really not far away. It's just on the other side of the Jordan Valley, so about maybe 5 kilometers away.
Have you ever done a wine that's just from that vineyard?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we have actually done a single vineyard wine from every vineyard we work with, save the small block of Pinot we have right on our home property here, which it isn't a very old vineyard, so it's only now 6 years old. Maybe my math might be wrong on that, but it hasn't yet produced something that we felt was quite there as far as a single vineyard wine. So, but you know what? We have yet to blend the 23s, so maybe this is the year.
You never know.
So, yeah,
could be. This is a wonderful wine.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I think a really nice example of what we can do here. And I think that this vintage variation that I spoke about here. I mean, anyone that lives in Southern Ontario knows that year to year, the weather varies a lot. We have sort of cooler summers, we have really hot summers, we have dry summers and rainy summers, and I think while if we were making a commercial, large scale commercial product where there was real demand to have uniformity vintage to vintage, maybe that would be viewed as a negative. But I look at it as a positive because we're able to provide our customers with a brand new experience every vintage. So we get the same wine making philosophy, the same techniques every year, the same intent every year, but with a different expression, a different story to tell from these vineyards. And I think that while there might be, depending on your taste, some vintages might appeal to you more. And maybe some, if you're thinking, well, I want to lay down a wine for 10 years, maybe some vintages are better than others for that. But they all provide enjoyment, or we wouldn't release them. And in fact, there have been times where we haven't released particular wines in a particular year because they didn't meet my standards. And we have the luxury of being able to do that. So. But I embrace that vintage variability that we have here, and I find that, and I actually have come to when I was first into fine wines, I would only buy, or I would sort of really look for the best vintages in Bordeaux and Burgundy and other regions, and now I realize that I find a producer that I really like, and I buy their wine every year, because I like seeing those lighter vintages and the heavier vintages. And I find that if you're with the right producer, the right winemakers, then you're going to get a really rewarding experience regardless of vintage.
I think that's what's great about wine, is that you never know what you're getting.
Yeah.
I know that one of the reasons I started this podcast was because when I moved to this area, I would invite people out for wine tastings, and they would say, well, I don't know anything about wine. But you don't have to.
No, you certainly don't.
Because wine is it's like a discovery path to find out what it is that you like. And it's basically an open invitation to go like we said, I might like this, you might not, but you might love it. We all have a difference of opinion, and our palates tell us what it is that we like.
Yeah. And look, it's possible that by nature of the fact that you have a wine podcast or a wine-focused podcast that everyone listening is going to be really into wine. I don't know. But I can tell you that if you are, the beauty of wine is if you enjoy it, that's enough. You don't have to read books about it. You don't have to remember what varietals are what. You don't have to know anything about the regions. That's all there for you if you want. And certainly for me, that's enhanced my enjoyment of wine. The more I've learned about wine throughout the world and its history and the various producers and the regions and the vintages, all of that has added to my enjoyment of wine. But if someone tells me they just want a glass of wine, and as long as they're able to find a wine that they enjoy, hopefully that they can afford, then that's fine. And everything beyond that is a bonus.
Well, my next door neighbor doesn't drink at all, and she loves the podcast.
Oh, well, that's great.
Because she says she's learning so much about the craft of winemaking. So I think that's spectacular. Question for you, though. We've talked a lot about the effects that the summer weather and the growing season has on the grapes. What about winter weather? How much does like a snowy or a super cold year affect the grapes?
Well, it certainly can, and we if you look at the Chardonnays that we had before, that's a prime example of that year, the 2022 vintage. The reason why we had a smaller crop that year was because at the end of 2021 into the very beginning of 2022, it was really mild. We had a stretch that was, I can't remember, +7, +10 degrees. Well, within a week, it was down into -27 in some parts of the Niagara Peninsula. Well, that kind of radical shift in temperature was too much for the vines. These vinifera varietals are really, we're growing them at the limit of the area of the, where geographically you can grow them. When you get into the mid, much below -22, and they're really the actual survival of the plants is at issue, and depending on how much, well, depending on the varietal, but also how much these plants have been able to acclimatize. So if it's been a slow decline in temperature, so that it's gone, in a sort of typical way from cooler through November, and then colder and colder and colder, and then it gets to those temperatures in January. The vines can handle it generally up to about -22 or so. But when you get a really serious shift like that, there's still a lot of moisture in the vines, and they haven't become hardy enough. And so in 2022, there were whole vineyards wiped out in Niagara. We were fortunate where we are here; it didn't get quite as cold, and the vineyards were maybe the airflow was such that we lost volume, lost a little bit of production, but there wasn't as much vine death in the area. So we certainly got off easy. Fortunately, we still made tremendous wines in 22, but that's a kind of extreme example of how winters can really damage things. Likewise, if it's a very mild spring, and we can also have problems. We can have problems because if the spring starts too early and the buds break, and we get that sort of early start to spring, the plant thinks it's go time. Well, we can still have a frost, and when you get a frost in the springtime before really that can happen up until the May 2/4 weekend, kind of is sort of when the farmers start to breathe a little easier, and certainly that full moon in May can bring some frost. So that can be mild winter can have its problems as well. So
thanks for answering that, because I often wonder about that, because everybody seems to focus on the growing season.
Yeah.
But
well, let me tell you what's in your glass now. So
beautiful wine.
Yeah. Well, we just tried. Prior, we tried it 2021, our blend of different vineyards. Well, this is the Hanck vineyard, single vineyard from 2021. It's our neighbors just to the north of us here, and this is a really it's a beautiful site. It has in some ways maybe it's the most the silkiest of the wines that we produce usually from Hanck Vineyard. Really lovely site. And I think this is a really good example. We have that maybe a slightly lighter year, like I mentioned before with 2021, but this is really powerful aroma and tons of flavor. It dances, with a real vibrancy, and I'm in love with this wine.
The color is stunning. It's so much darker. It's kind of like the second Chardonnay we had.
Yeah,
a much deeper color, and the nose on it is stunning.
It really is. It really is. I'm actually I'm thrilled with this wine, and it's just I don't, even though I I certainly get to taste these wines. I don't always taste every wine often enough, and particularly in this first year after bottling, they change so much month to month that tasting this week. This is the second time this week I've been able to try this, and I'm just loving where it's at right now.
It's really beautiful. It's such a delicate wine, but so full of body and flavor.
And the flavor doesn't drop off quickly at the end. It tapers really nicely for a long time, and leaves you with a really, really clean and persistent finish.
It's like you go, I have to have another sip.
Yeah.
Just so that it tells me more.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But it's
and then soon enough your glass is empty.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And then you're like, what?
And then you pour another one. So
that Hanck vineyard is known for some of the most amazing Pinots in this area.
Yeah, they it really is it's a wonderful site, and it's interesting. I mean, we're not going to get a direct comparison because the vintage is different, but the next wine we'll try is a vineyard rather that's right beside it.
Mm.
So, and I'm talking about, maybe 20, 30 yards away, just enough room to get the tractors through.
It's just...
Yeah, but you'll see it's quite a different site, Parke. The one we'll try next is from 2020, so you'll see a vineyard difference and a vintage difference.
I've never been disappointed by a Pinot Noir from the Hanck vineyards.
No, it's true. It's true.
It's really interesting how that one area of land can create such amazing wines.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's interesting because, as I said, we create Pinot from a number of different vineyards in the area, and they're all different. But we'll have people taste them, and different people go to different things. But I think more often than not, people agree that Hanck is a special site.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So next we have the Parke Vineyard, which is also owned by the Wismer family, like the Wingfield and Foxcroft. And this is the 2020 vintage. It's a bigger wine, certainly, than the wines we just visited from 2021. And Parke, that's Parke with an E on the end, is a really, really cool site. It tends to be the most powerful vineyard that we draw from. It and often one that requires a little bit more time. So it's nice to have something from the library here. Our 2020 vintage Parke. It's a little bit broader. I think it's going to live a long time.
It's got that very earthy, that really earthy smell to it.
Yeah, and you'll see. I mean, that's part of it's the age. It's starting to hit middle age where you've got that combination of primary fruit, but now being complemented by some of those earthy tertiary notes.
So fruit forward on the first sip, and beautiful deep color. It's almost like the color of like a Cabernet.
And again, that's entirely down to the vintage that we had in 2020. It was, 2020 will be remembered by everyone as being such a dreadful year. Of course, it was the year of COVID, and everyone's lives got turned upside down. Well, I say the only good thing that happened that year was the fact that we had this, absolutely stunning vintage here.
Oh, this is spectacular.
Oh, well, that's nice to hear.
It's almost like I can taste cherries and plums and cranberries and maybe a little bit of strawberry in there.
And then a lot of spice as well.
Yeah, definitely spice. It's like, a little bit of pepper around the edge. This is, it's like a meal in a glass.
Yeah, and really complex. And as I said, it's just getting better and better, this wine. I think it's going to have quite a future ahead of it.
Like, I don't even know what food I would want to pair that with, because I think I just want to drink it on its own.
Well, you could certainly, but I think I think of like a duck breast with a rich sauce would be ideal with this. And
absolutely fantastic. It's 2020.
Yeah, 2020 Parke Vineyard. So right from a vineyard that we can, if we can look out the window here and see the vineyard, it's right beside the winery, and really a tremendous site.
I think when I was here in the summer with a friend of mine from Montreal, and we were doing a tasting, and she said to the woman that was serving it, she's like, "I'd really want to try that." She's like, "Well, my manager's not here and I can't open it." She's like, "I guarantee you I will buy it if you open it." So she did.
Good.
And there was a table next to us, which with two gentlemen that were also from Quebec. And they were like, "Yeah, we want to try that as well." And she ended up buying 4 bottles.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think they bought 6. So it was like, it was well worth her opening that bottle because we were all blown away by how amazing this wine was.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's really it's a great site, and as I said, the 2020 vintage allowed us to have a lot of fun making wine, and so we ended up, and it was really interesting. Those a few times where we've been able to open all 6 single vineyards beside each other, and you really get an incredible tour through 20 Mile Bench and see the different expressions of Pinot that are possible here.
But it's so cool as well that it's like what you said. It's like just a few feet away from the Hanck vineyard, and it's just a completely different taste.
Yeah.
It's literally, I can't even like. If I was going to write a love letter, it would be to this wine.
Very good.
Absolutely spectacular. Adam, I just want to say that this has been a stunningly wonderful afternoon.
Well, I'm really glad you came, and thank you for your tremendous support for what we're doing here in Niagara, because we love it here. We have so many great fans of the wine here, and the more people we can get to come and experience it, the better. So,
well, I hope that listeners, you will actually come out here to Cloudsley Cellars because it's fantastic.
Well, we welcome everyone here. So,
and I just want to say that I hope that you enjoyed this podcast, and thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time. It is absolutely fantastic. Be sure to visit our show notes because that will have information about the winery. You'll have the link to the website. I'll have a list of all the wines that we've sampled. And be sure to also like and follow Spill the Wine because we need more listeners so that we can keep talking about wines in the area. If there's any other wineries that you think we should be visiting, be sure to tell us that as well. And you could also look for us on Instagram at @spillthewine_podcast and follow us on there, because then you'll see pictures of the glasses, you'll see pictures of the wine, pictures of the winery, and you'll actually really want to keep following us and keep coming out here to Wine Country because we have the most spectacular wines in the world. And I'm not going to stop saying that. Thank you again, Adam.
Cheers.
And cheers.